After months and weeks of getting to this point, we are pretty happy with it. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. We have a split government here in Pennsylvania. You know, I know you haven't heard that. I know you never heard the governor say that 30,000 times. We are the only state in the country with a split government. But I just want to say that that's not unique. We had it with Governor Rendell, and many states have it. So you have to find a way to come to a consensus because we're here to govern. We have to make decisions. We don't love all of them, but we know that the other side doesn't love all of them either. I think we did some really, really good work in this budget. Our teams have been fabulous. We continue to make some inroads into education, which is always the biggest issue that we face. I am disappointed that we weren't able to get something done for the children who are trapped in failing schools and who are continue failing. You know, we will come back to fight another day on that issue. We did increase the earned income tax credit, which helps many, many kids get out of schools. But I want to go back at some point and fight again for this program that the governor said he supports, but had no interest in pursuing at all this time around. So I think that we have done a good job keeping spending down, doing some things that matter. Nursing homes matter. Social services matter. Education matters. Our environment matters. Our permitting reform really matters. I'm not going to talk too deeply about those issues because that's what these guys are here for. But I'm proud of the work that we have done and what we have gotten done in this budget. We've done things that will help Pennsylvania keep our kids here. Senator Martin's GROW legislation. We're going to be able to say, stay here in Pennsylvania and we'll help you with your education. That's big. And it's very forward thinking, and I'm very proud of the work that he did on this. So overall, this was a good budget. It's not a perfect budget. It's not perfect for us. It's not perfect for the Democrats, but it is the state of where we are in Pennsylvania. We have a split government. I think we did a great job with, you know, I have been here for a long time, and sometimes we didn't get this budget done 1 year until December, 1 year until October. But we did it, and we did it with not a lot of fighting and fanfare. So thank you, and it is my distinct honor to introduce my friend Joe Pittman. And off the record, just so you know, Joe Pittman came and ran my campaign in 2008, and I'm still his boss.
Indeed, our pro tem is our boss, and I appreciate the way Kim has framed this budget here at the outset. As we have discussed, we believe that this budget meets the basic hallmarks of our Senate Republican majority because it is an honest budget. It's honest about the realities of divided government. It's honest with the taxpayers. It's honest about the challenges of inflation. But it also meets the hallmark of our caucus whenever it comes to empowerment, because as the pro tem said, the Education Improvement Tax Credit is about empowerment. And we have now twice in the last 6 months increased the opportunities to families by increasing the Education Improvement Tax Credit funding. $225 million just in the last 6 months is now available to empower parents to make decisions that are best for their children. We found the right balance whenever it comes to the Commonwealth Court ruling. We accepted the charge that the governor and the General Assembly need to come up with a different way to fund education in this Commonwealth, to provide educational opportunities. We're proud of the work that we have done there because we think it's defensible, we think it's accountable, and we were able to achieve some additional protection for property taxpayers. So I think on balance, as the pro tem said, this is a solid product, not a perfect product, but a product that we can hopefully build on and continue to advance the hallmarks of our elected majority in the years ahead. Senator Scott Martin, our chairman.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sure you're all as tired as we are, too. We're happy we were able to wrap this up. Beside the fact that we're dealing with divided government, I think everyone here is aware, many of you covered, the state does face some challenges demographically. I was just reading a story just a couple days ago about our 2023 stats of losing another 10,000 people. We constantly are hearing from the employers out there who just can't find people with the right job skills to get into certain jobs. So that really has been a driving force in the things that we have focused on as a caucus and the things we've advocated for at the table. And we understand that we're not going to fully get everything we want, especially in divided government, but I'm very proud of our efforts when you talk about addressing some of those things that can potentially start turning the tide for PA's demographic growth. When you talk about the Grow PA initiative that we focused on for higher ed and really getting more of an investment or more of a return on the taxpayer investment in things that Pennsylvania needs, and more importantly, getting them to stay here. That was a huge effort, not only by our caucus, but in bipartisan fashion here in this chamber, even over in the House, and obviously as we wrapped up the budget. When we are all aware of things that employers and folks who are investing in new opportunities in states have talked about why they don't choose Pennsylvania to make investments and to bring jobs, it was that high corporate net income tax. It was the fact that people are always downing our permitting system. And these are the things that we really wanted to take a hard look at and get our foot in the door to try to turn that tide a little bit. So I personally am very pleased and happy by the effort not only of our caucus, but also in bipartisan fashion to get our foot in the door on things. Listen, I make no mistake about it. You've sat through our budget hearings. You've heard our concerns. We'll continue to be concerned over the fact until we start growing, and usually that growth will accompany more revenues, there are future battles ahead that we'll face as we try to make sure that we maintain fiscal solvency here in this Commonwealth and stability. But for today, I'm happy we reached resolution. I'm happy that we fought for equity across the board for school districts all across Pennsylvania, which was a big tug of war point in these negotiations. And we look forward to keeping the work together come the fall and beyond to keep trying to turn the state around.
Go ahead, Joe.
A couple questions? Of course, Dennis.
You guys had talked about wanting to have a personal income tax reduction, and you want to cut taxes in general. You said there's extra money, we're going to give it back. What areas in this budget did that you can hang your hat on? I know there wasn't a personal income tax decrease, but where are you happy about where you're doing some of that?
We're very happy about the fact that we have gone to a net operating loss carry forward. Now that sounds very technical, but the reality is that's going to allow startup entrepreneurs, small businesses to invest and grow. We were one of the last two states in the nation, us in New Hampshire, that did not have that provision. We have achieved that provision after years of focus on it. And I also want to point out we have continued the commitment of reducing the corporate net income tax that we had set out to do several years ago. So those are important pieces of the equation and something we're quite proud of.
My last question, what's your relationship with House Republicans? Because almost to a person, they're complaining about the spend number here, $2.5 billion over last year, which means the floor next year is probably going to be 47.6 and only going up from there. They're concerned it spends too much money.
I think they have to recognize that elections have consequences.
And I would just add to that too, these last two budgets, given the divided government, and yet we're still able to keep our spending growth, especially in an inflationary environment, especially with a lot of the collective bargaining agreements that were handed down, that we've kept it below Tabor in both years, I think is something we can all be proud of. Listen, we've been at this a long time, and I've heard some of those stories, but when your Tabor rate is 5.7% and you have a budget that's coming in at 4.7, I think that we did a good job of trying to reach an agreement without being fiscally irresponsible, but also recognizing is that as we move forward, that there is going to be more. I mean, I'm hopeful that our revenues take off. We all are. That the economy grows. But as we keep moving forward and you hear us talking about the out years, that's going to continue to be a focus of ours and trying to somehow, with that ultimate goal of somehow having a structurally balanced budget.
You just cut a pretty big deal here. Sorry, and I'm just kind of curious, looking to the fall, do you think there's any lessons you have from this to maybe cut a future deal? There's still some time left to legislate on stuff like minimum wage, statute of limitations, voter ID that are still kind of badgering the General Assembly.
Well, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, we're just kind of hoping the House comes back this fall. it'll be telling. And those are some big issues. And, you know, I'm sure that across the hall, because we've tried for a long time, but they are sitting on a constitutional amendment where they could get voter ID and statute of limitations. And they don't want to do voter ID so bad that they won't pass that constitutional amendment.
Is there still room for work on the skill games issue or marijuana legalization? Are those didn't make it in, but are they things that you continue to look for?
Well, I think there's room for work on a number of issues. Energy issues, the issue of games of skill is obviously an issue. We recognize that there are many that have concerns over transit funding, transportation infrastructure funding. Those are all areas that need to be addressed. I will say that we were pleasantly surprised that the House sent us a carbon capture and sequestration bill. That's an important component to energy policy here in the Commonwealth. Senator Jean Yaw has worked very hard on that issue, and that was certainly, in our opinion, at least by the majority of our members, a positive development here at a late hour.
So that bill didn't come from your chamber, that came completely from the House. It wasn't on the table beforehand.
Well, we passed carbon capture and sequestration several months ago, I believe. The House didn't seem to have an interest in passing it, but we got a surprise in July. So.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
How would you describe your negotiations with House Democrats, Leader Bradford and Governor Shapiro?
Tedious, quite frankly. I still believe that there is a real challenge between the governor and the House Democrat majority reconciling differences, being on the same page. The pace of the negotiations, the pace of the conversation was tedious, it was slow, and we could have done a much better job, in my opinion, if they would have been more coordinated in their positions on a number of issues sooner than they were.
I will just say, I mean, I agree with that. You know, we started this process at a relatively early, point in time. And our goal was to always turn around counter proposals relatively quick. It was more than obvious they weren't on the same page. I mean, after thinking out the first one, it might have been 9 days. We got it back to them the same day or the next day. Then it was 6 days. And so that was kind of the pace of things. And as we got a little bit closer, there's always those, but what about this? That we would face. And, and of course, in kind of an unheralded thing in this whole discussion, there was quite a wrestling match. And it ended up, I think, in bipartisan support over how the monies, especially in education related to adequacy, were going to be driven out. I think that's going to continue to be an issue going forward. You cannot have a system where the bulk of your monies for these things being driven out only are going to a few select schools, and the rest of your schools in your county or beyond are all showing goose eggs. And I think once people started to realize how these formulas really started to pair up, so us really pushing that data, us pushing the census data as to self-reporting, which even the Secretary of Ed had mentioned is they can't audit it, they can't verify it, and we have a lot of examples where the reporting is not always accurate. That was pretty intense, and I think we ended up winning out in bipartisan way across the state to make sure, yes, we're dealing with some equity issues, but at the same time, we were protecting other school districts too that also have needs.
Were all three of you on the same page throughout talks?
Sure. Obviously, we have different points of views on a number of issues, but unlike some of our principals at the negotiating table, we sat down, we figured out where we wanted to go, make sure we understood where each other was coming from. We got on the same page. As Senator Martin said, we did it quickly, we did it efficiently and effectively.
I think a lot of that's good teams, and we're very open and honest and communicate with each other with what facts are and what we see them. I think on a lighter note too, she'd be quick to grab us each by an ear, if we got too out of line. So,
without a commitment to future year funding for education, are you worried that the advocates will go back and take to the court?
I'll tell you what, if the advocates go back to court, in my opinion, they're wasting time and it's highly counterproductive, because when you look at what we've done, and you have to reconcile what the Commonwealth Court ultimately said. The Commonwealth Court said it's up to the governor and the General Assembly to figure out a different way to support educational opportunities in this Commonwealth. That's what we've done. We've done it in facilities, we've done it in special education, we've done it in cyber charter reform, and we did it through a new formula that, as Senator Martin said, is transparent, justifiable, and accountable. So we have, in our view, more than met the edict of the Commonwealth Court opinion.
I think it's always remembered important. I mean, it's no one's best interest to be like, yeah, we're going to sign a 7-year deal, not knowing where revenues are going. And quite frankly, it's a much different environment than it was back when that lawsuit was first filed. I mean, there's already before today, there was over $5.2 billion new dollars in BEF. I think you're also well aware that overall in Pennsylvania, the number of kids in our school system continues to decline. We just had the smallest kindergarten class since 1986 that's going to be working its way through. So there's so many dynamics that each year I think we're going to have to, analyze and try to do the right thing.
Okay, just 2 more questions.
Senator, we also heard from a number of House Republicans that said that they didn't feel that they had a seat at the table when it came to expressing their concerns over spending. What would be your response to their claims there?
I think they need to get a seat at the table by retaking the majority.
Charlie's what he's gonna say.
Consequences.
President Christian Morton had mentioned that the governor said that he was uninterested in pursuing vouchers. Can you explain that further?
Well, because we took that, trying to get passed on again, and the governor was not willing to push or help with that. Wasn't going to use his bully pulpit to help us get that through the House, as he didn't last year. So it really wasn't a big shock that he said, I support it, but I'm not interested in working toward it. It's just kind of like, I probably should stop talking now, but it's just kind of like the marijuana, right? He came out, and I'm not saying I'm for that, but he talked about that in his budget address. We never heard another word about it. He didn't come back to us and talk about skill games. We started to do that ourselves. So, it's a lot of show, but not a lot of go, as far as I'm concerned when I hear some of those speeches.
Last question, Charlie.
Yeah, I just was interested in the permitting reform that's in the fiscal code, and I was just wondering, is that ability to hire third-party reviewers, is that totally new in Pennsylvania? And what kind of permits is that intended for? I think I saw that it was like dams and soil disturbance.
We can get you some follow-up details on it, but what I will say is the permitting reform was an absolute priority of our caucus. We think that is a massive shift in moving the bureaucracy along in this Commonwealth. It's no secret that DEP, quite frankly, has not been very customer-friendly whenever it comes to encouraging individuals who want to invest in this Commonwealth to get shovels in the ground and make those investments. So we think that is a game changer. It's probably one of the most proud achievements that we have through this process, and we're glad we were able to reconcile that issue.
Well, could you say approximately how much of DEP's permitting could be outsourced?
We can get you some follow-up on that. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.